So what exactly made the classic Resident Evil 2 such an amazing game? Was it the fact that we were introduced to several characters that would later on become iconic in the gaming industry? Or was it the introduction of the new and more powerful G-Virus, the new monsters, or the amazing soundtrack that plays during the game? Or maybe it was the fact that it took everything that was successful from the first Resident Evil game and did exactly what a sequel is supposed to do, actually make a gaming sequel that was actually good, unlike some games out there. Another great thing that this game did was that it built on top of all the good things from the previous game and added so much more content that we the players were able to enjoy the game for such a long time. It's just awesome to look back and appreciate how this became such a beloved game in the Resident Evil series and that they're finally making a remake of it, which I can't wait to get my hands on.
It's coming back!
So anyways, what is up you guys, this is DeVuH, and in this video we're going to talk about some general aspects of the classic Resident Evil 2 game and answer some questions as to what made it such a great game for the masses and why arguably, maybe to even some people, the best in the series. Alright, starting off, let's talk about the story of the game and where exactly it places on the timeline. So the game starts off several months after the events of both Resident Evil 0 and Resident Evil 1, where the T-Virus outbreak occurred in the Arklay Mountains near Raccoon City. The RPD's STARS Alpha and Bravo unit investigated in the incident, which led them to fight many monsters that resulted in almost wiping out the whole unit, except for Chris Redfield, Jill Valentine, Barry Burton, and Rebecca Chambers. So now we have the game start off with Leon and Claire heading towards Raccoon City, having no idea that the city is already infested with zombies and other monsters. Leon is there because it was supposed to be his first day as a rookie cop for the RPD, and Claire is there looking for her missing brother Chris Redfield, who is one of the surviving STARS members from the previous game.
I'm finally here.
Soon after arriving, both Leon and Claire are surprised when hordes of zombies attack them. Eventually both meet up and head towards the police station using a conveniently placed cop car where the previous owner also left the keys for them to use.
Wait! Don't shoot!
Get down! We can't stay out here. Head to the police station. It'll be a lot safer. Buckle up.
Okay.
While on their way to the police station, a zombie who is hiding in the back seat of the car attacks both characters, which ends up causing them to crash, and soon after that, they get separated when a large semi-truck crashes into them.
That maniac's gonna whip! Run! Claire!
Leon!
I'm okay. Head to the station. I'll meet you there.
Okay.
After the accident, both characters traverse for a brief time outside the RPD station while they fight off hordes of zombies and watch them cannibalize any survivors.
What's going on in this town?
Hold on. I ain't got no clue, darling. By the time I noticed something was wrong, the entire city was infested with zombies.
Eventually, both arrive in the RPD station and meet in the STARS members' office, where they both find out that Chris has already left Raccoon City with the other remaining STARS members to take down the Umbrella Corporation in Europe.
Leon!
It's good to see you're still among the living. It looks like we're not gonna find your brother hereafter.
After discovering Chris's whereabouts, Leon and Claire realizes that there isn't much left to do but to find and save any survivors and escape Raccoon City. So during their escape, both characters faces a variety of monsters like the Naked Zombies, the Licker, Mr. X, and William Birkin, and other miscellaneous monsters that didn't get mentioned. Along the way, both characters will eventually meet with a partner where they both try to fight off all the monsters in their way and escape alongside with the player. For Claire, her partner is Sherry Birkin, and for Leon is Ada Wong. So in a nutshell, without going into too much detail, each character will follow their own respective storyline, but will eventually be able to escape Raccoon City by traversing through the RPD police station and going through the sewers where they fight off a giant alligator until they make their way to the Umbrella's secret lab where they finally make their escape by train. Throughout the game, both Leon and Claire has to overcome their respective obstacles. For example, here Leon is dealing with the fact that as a rookie officer, he's obligated to help as many survivors as he can while he's trying to cooperate with the mysterious Ada Wong, while at the same time having their plotline intertwined with the events of the G-Virus outbreak, which is explained by Annette Birkin, the wife of the man who created the G-Virus, William Birkin.
Are you telling me that he injected the G-Virus into his own body?
The G-Virus has the ability to revitalize cellular functions.
Also, while playing as Leon, the player gets to encounter Annette a couple of times, and each interaction seems to show her as more of an antagonist compared to if the player played as Claire, where we get to see her more as a distressed parent, where she tries to keep Sherry as safe as possible and doesn't actively try to kill the player. Anyways, talking about Claire, her plotline revolves around trying to figure out where her brother went until she finds Sherry Birkin, and they both try to escape Raccoon City while being hunted down by William and then eventually trying to save Sherry's life after being infected with the G-Virus.
Claire, what's happening?
Not now. Come on, Sherry, wake up. Wake up. Please wake up. Claire? Where am I?
It worked!
Oh, Sherry. You're gonna be okay. Thanks, Claire.
Also, both characters encounter and fight both Mr. X and William Birkin several times throughout the game. So later on in this video, we'll talk about these two boss monsters with a little bit more detail and show how they help make this game one of the best that's come out in the series. So far, it appears that the game's plot follows a very straightforward narrative, but it's the hurdles that each character has to overcome and the enemies they face alongside with the great soundtrack that made this game great. Because in this game, the player has a chance to play either as Leon or Claire on Scenario A, where we get one side of the story of each character and we get to see the subtle differences throughout their playthrough. And later on in the video, we'll delve into the differences between the Scenario A and Scenario B and how that affects the storyline and why it was such a great part of the game. Alright, so let's jump into some gameplay aspects in a little bit more detail and show how this title became the very definition of what a survival horror game should be.
Those zombies aren't the only things crawling around out there.
What was that?
Like I said, I'm not leaving this cell. Get out of here before you lead it right to me.
One of the first things that we the players notice in the game is that we are forced to play with caution, knowing that you can only take a couple of hits before your character dies. Also, this game doesn't provide you with excess ammo, overpowered weapons, and insane maneuverability. What this game does provide though is fixed camera angles, slow tanky controls, powerful enemies, puzzles, and lots of jump scares. At first glance, it seems like a negative when you break down some of the aspects of the game that we just mentioned, like for example the fixed camera angles and the slow tanky controls. But these are the things that give the player a sense of powerlessness and fear throughout the game, knowing that we can't just easily dodge enemies, knowing that we can't just mow down hordes of zombies due to the lack of ammo, knowing that you can't just blaze through an area without any kind of repercussion. Because here, we the players aren't given a superhuman character who is all roided up, who also wants to roleplay as Indiana Jones, who can also survive a freaking plane crash while at the same time fighting Neo from the Matrix. Oh, and don't get me started with the whole punching boulders thing too. Here in contrast, we are forced to play smart, where we have to conserve our ammo and not use up all of our healing items, not just jumping to monsters and zombies and always making sure to shoot those zombies who are pretending to be dead. I don't know if that made any kind of sense, but you know what I mean. While all this takes place in amazing environments like the RPD station, the sewers, the factory, and also the underground laboratory. Talking about graphics, even though we are placed in a pre-rendered environment, for its time it was leaps and bounds ahead of the game. It's the place that we get to see and go through that makes the game so memorable. Like, who can forget the moment when we first got to use our characters, where we fight through the zombie infested city until we finally stepped into the RPD station, where we get a great pan shot of the area while hearing the background music for the first time and not knowing what kind of horrors we're about to face. Or that time while heading towards the laboratory, where we get to enjoy the environment of the factory with the ominous soundtrack that plays in the background. Oh, and let's not forget when we the players have to escape the underground laboratory before it blows up, while at the same time having to fight against some ungodly powerful monsters, all the while listening to the music that gives the player a sense of tension and fear, knowing that we only got a limited amount of time to escape. Anyways, talking about the music, this game provides some of the best soundtracks of its time, some of which even to this day is still remembered as some of the best. Like for example, the music that plays in the save room. I mean, who can forget that feeling of barely making out of an area filled with monsters while your health is on danger, then finally passing through that door, then suddenly this music plays. This music can give the player a sense of relief, even if it's only for a short amount of time. Oh, and let's not forget to mention that soundtrack that plays when we first encounter the liquor and how menacing it was when we first heard it. Knowing we got this demonic looking creature crawling on the roof with his brains out in the open while having razor sharp talons that causes the players massive damage and a snake like tongue that can pierce the player's flesh. It all seems that the soundtrack is just perfect for each setting, whether it needs to invoke fear and tension or calmness and serenity. It is used in a way that would always keep the players on their toes. So in the end, the soundtrack in this game gives it a major nostalgia factor that can always tug on the player's heartstrings.
We're leaving this place together. Wait here for me. I'll be right back.
Another great addition to this game, like I mentioned earlier, was the fact that we get to play two different viewpoints of the storyline, which is Scenario A and Scenario B. Initially when we first play the game, we're automatically set to play on Scenario A and going through the storyline for both Leon and Claire and fighting the set versions of the enemies and bosses and going through some conflicts and hurdles like any gaming storyline would. I mean, after finishing the game, sure there were some things I had questions on, like how Claire or Leon made it to the RPD station from the other side of the accident that happened at the start of the game, or why William Birkin threw a pipe to the player when we first fought him while heading down the secret lab. But after finishing the first scenario, we're given the option of playing through the game once again on B scenario, but this time, it lets you play through the game from the other side's perspective. It answers several questions we had from the first scenario and builds on top of that. For example, one of the questions we had was why William was holding a pipe when we were heading down to the underground lab on our first playthrough. To answer that, it was revealed on B scenario that we actually encountered him as a boss and his primary weapon was a pipe. Other questions are also answered, like how did the helicopter crash on top of the RPD station? We actually find this out when we're treated to a cutscene early in the scenario. Or another simple question was, how did the other character reach the RPD station from the other side of the crash? Which that answer was very simple. We were literally just a corner away from the RPD station. But overall, the addition of Scenario B was a great treat for the players because we get to experience the game in a different light. The many additions to the plot and cutscenes gave it so much replay value. In the end, we can literally end up playing 4 different playthroughs depending on which character we choose to play first. So for example, if we choose to play Leon in Scenario A, we get to play Claire on Scenario B and vice versa. Also, if we do end up beating the game on Scenario B, we the players get a little treat at the end, which I'll discuss in a little bit later. But I think one of the most important aspects to Scenario B, besides answering some plotline questions from our first playthrough, was the addition of boss battles with Mr. X and William Birkin, which these bosses are, in my opinion, really made the game from being just good to great. It was these boss appearances and battles that made people talk about the game for years, and how it was etched in our minds why Resident Evil 2 was arguably the best in the series. So before we talk about them, let's transition by talking about some of the other awesome sub-bosses that we fight before them. Alright, so the first sub-boss we'll talk about is the G-Mutant. So what exactly is the G-Mutant? It's an embryonic parasite that was planted into either Ben or Chief Irons by William Birkin. So we can essentially say that the G-Mutant is actually the love baby of these three characters.
Get away!
No, but seriously though, the first time we get to see it is in this gruesome scene where it rips itself out of the torso of Ben or Chief Irons.
Oh, my chest! It's burning! What's wrong?
Later on, we the players get to see it laying on its side twitching, but then it mutates into this grotesque four-legged bald monster with an enlarged arm with claws, while at the same time it's vomiting parasites that can attach itself to the player. The fight itself isn't too difficult, as long as you're able to eliminate the smaller parasites and dodge when he swings his claws towards you. This boss is barely the tip of the iceberg when it comes to fighting a G monster, and a little bit later we'll talk about William Birkin and all his G mutations. The next boss we'll talk about is the iconic giant alligator. I remember when I first saw the box art for this game, and I knew eventually that I would have to face this monster. It didn't hit me until I walked into the actual boss arena that I realized that this was it. This was a moment before the fight. We then encountered this monster after reaching the end of the tunnel. This was actually a very straightforward fight. We are placed in a tunnel-like environment where the alligator slowly creeps forward until he's able to corner the character, and if you don't deal enough damage to it, then this can happen. Here, the player has the option of either wasting your bullets trying to fend off the monster, or you can easily push a button to where you could drop a small cylindrical bomb and have the alligator gobble it up, and all you have to do is shoot it once to blow its head into pieces. So this whole boss experience with the giant alligator, in my opinion, was more of a show than a tough boss battle, especially since we're given the option to one-shot the alligator. But I guess just the fact that we fight a giant alligator in the sewers was memorable enough to keep the survival horror enthusiasts on their toes. Finally, let's talk about the menacing Mr. X. He is one of the reasons why this game was so amazing. I mean, who the heck's this monster who stalks the players throughout the game, always coming at the worst possible times, especially when the players have their guard down while exploring the areas throughout the game? The answer to that in a nutshell is that Mr. X is a type of tyrant made by Umbrella to eliminate whoever they think that should be eliminated. In this case, it was either Leon or Claire. He is first seen when an Umbrella helicopter drops what looks like a large cylindrical tank, but then it quickly breaks apart and reveals this large trench coat wearing humanoid monster drop into one of the hallways on the second floor of the RPD station. When we the players encounter him for the first time, the first thing we notice is the loud and thudding footsteps that's slowly creeping closer to the player. Not long after that, we finally get to see our first real-time look at the tyrant, with his hulking body standing heads above the player, making sure you feel powerless in his presence. Mr. X's attacks are pretty basic. He can either sideswipe you, which will cause you to fall back slightly, or he can straight up smack you to the floor, and after enough hits, you can end up like this. Also, Mr. X isn't the easiest monster to beat as well. We the players have to use a crap ton of bullets just to get him down. The good thing is, if we do happen to beat him, we can pick up some ammo from him. So throughout the game, we the players get the privilege of encountering Mr. X several times, and you know what? These encounters are some of the best times I've had during this game. I mean, who can forget when he just happens to follow you all the way to the top floor of the RPD station? Or the time when he comes bursting through the wall not just once, but twice in a short amount of time. Or what about that time when we watch him on the camera slowly approaching and proceeds to break the camera out just because he knows he can? Or when we finally encounter him for the last time, we get to see this awesome intro to the battle with him. Here, he's fully transformed without his signature trench coat, but now sporting two large claws while surrounded with flames throughout his body. In this fight, he moves very fast. He's able to slash you from a distance. So we the players have to always be on our toes fighting him. By the way, it doesn't help that we only got a couple of minutes before the whole place blows up. When we've dealt enough damage to him, we finally get to finish him off with this. It just feels so nice when we finally get to blow up this monster who's tormented us for so long, and the icing to the cake is that we get to taunt him before he dies.
You lose, big guy.
Overall, Mr. X has been a great addition to this game, and I hope the remake does a great job reimagining him. Alright, so finally, let's talk about my favorite boss in the game, William Birkin. So let's do a quick synopsis of who he is and how he became one of the most ferocious monsters in the Resident Evil series. William was a brilliant scientist who worked for Umbrella for many years and became the creator of the G virus, which is a more powerful variant strain of the T virus. And even though he worked for Umbrella, William was actually attempting to betray Umbrella and hand over his work to the US military in exchange for asylum for his family. But Umbrella found out his attempts of betrayal and sent Umbrella operatives, which included Hung, to assassinate the scientist and retrieve the G virus.
There he is.
So you finally come.
Doctor, we're here to collect the G virus sample.
Sorry, but I won't just hand over my life's work.
But unbeknownst to them though, after receiving multiple gunshot wounds, William was still holding on to the sample of the G virus, which he later on injected into his own body because, as explained by Annette Birkin,
Are you telling me that he injected the G virus into his own body?
The G virus has the ability to revitalize cellular functions.
William would transform into this large humanoid monster who grew in a large right arm with an eyeball, which is a trademark mutation of the G virus. He then followed Umbrella operatives and hunted them down in the sewers and proceeded to kill all of them except for Hunk.
What is this thing? Hurry!
What made William as one of the best antagonists in this game is the fact that you get to fight against him several times, and after each time he becomes a more powerful version of himself. It's these slow and multiple mutations that we the player get to see that always makes you feel on edge, because regardless of how the player may progress throughout the game, thinking that they're finally getting a better grip of the controls or they're attaining new weapons, we get to see this G monster grow in strength alongside the player. I mean, who can deny that they didn't enjoy each transformation? Seeing this regular human slowly transform into a monstrosity. It's almost as though each mutation we get to see William go through, he experiences some agony. Okay, so depending on which scenario we play, we'll get to fight against different versions of William Birkin. In total, there should be 5 different mutations, with one of them having a slight variation depending on the scenario. Each boss fight plays slightly different from the other, which starts from William still having some semblance as a human until he becomes a massive mutated blob with tentacles and teeth. It's the boss battles that occur with William and the subsequent mutations that make this game amazing. We get to see him change right before our eyes, and with each mutation comes with a different battle dynamic. For example, when we see his first form in Scenario B, William hasn't fully mutated yet, but he does grow slightly larger in size. And if we zoom in, we can see what appears to be a small appendage growing from his body. Then later on, we get to see him change again and again to the point where we see this hulking monster who towers above the player with 4 arms, each equipped with large talons that could shred the players. While also his former human head has now moved to his upper chest and replaced with a new G-mutated head. Also we see now is a large protrusion on his chest. It's almost as though his ribcage is trying to rip out of his body. This isn't even the strongest version of the G mutation yet. During the final fight on Scenario A, we get to see him burst down from the ceiling, still having those 4 arms, but this time we notice that his chest area has bulked up in size and formed a large opening to what appears to be another orifice. After the ensuing battle, here we finally see him turn into his most devastating form. This former human being turned into an abomination, something that can only come out of a nightmare. With his newfound speed and strength, William's mutation allows him to jump from platform to platform, climb on walls, and if that's not enough, he can also chase after you if you try to run. I mean, for Pete's sake, if you're unlucky enough to get caught by him, he'll proceed to chew on you and spit you out. This is exactly what I missed on the later entries of the series. I wanted to see a monster like this, who you can't just easily outmaneuver. A monster whose appearance alone could send shivers down your spine. A monster that was created to be iconic in the Resident Evil series. What's another compliment to the already ferocious monster is the menacing soundtrack that plays along with it. Same as William's progression to inhumanity, the soundtrack changes as well. I mean, who can forget the vocals of the opera lady mixed in with the steady beat of uncanny brooding approach. The soundtrack does give a sense of something manifesting, continually moving inside the player's mind. It's the perfect culmination soundtrack of the G-Virus, and it represents how it infects its host to the point of unprecedented change through all its mutations. Alright, so after beating the game, we the players finally get a sigh of relief knowing we just beat the main boss in the game, and we get the cutscene where both Leon and Claire escape via train with Sherry. It all ends with a blackout screen knowing that both protagonists have dealt with their respective obstacles and now are free to have a happy ending.
Claire. Sherry.
But this is changed with Scenario B's true ending. Like I mentioned earlier, after beating the game on Scenario B, we're given a great addition to the game where we get to see the same ending cutscene from Scenario A, but instead of blacking out and rolling the credits, we suddenly get a red alert stating that there's a BOW on board of the train.
Warning, biohazardous outbreak imminent. The emergency system has been activated. This train will detonate. Repeat, this train will detonate.
It is later revealed that William was able to latch himself onto the train and mutate into this large blob monster with tentacles. This is a true final battle. Even though it's a much easier fight in this version of his mutation, it's nice that we get to see this additional content. But the most satisfying portion of this game is the ending cutscene of how Leon and Claire escape the train and set their way out to go take down Umbrella.
Warning,
self-destruct system has been activated. Each train compartment will detonate sequentially. Repeat, each train compartment will detonate sequentially.
Leon, stop the train!
I can't. The door to the control room is locked.
What? What is it?
Sherry, get back! That's what I call ugly. Claire! Where are you?
You don't give up, do you?
Sherry! What are you doing?
We have to stop the train, right? I can do it!
Sherry! Persistent, aren't you? Well, come and get it!
Which one's the right switch? Maybe this one? Sherry! Claire! Ah!
Can't hold on much longer.
Push the switch over there! Got it!
Finally.
Are you okay, Sherry?
I'm okay.
Where's Leon?
Leon? Leon!
Right here.
Leon!
You're both safe. Just die. We've got to get out of here. Move it! Go! That was a close one. That was pretty impressive back there, Sherry.
It was nothing. I saw someone do that on TV once.
Come on. We've got to move out.
Now what's the problem? Is something following us?
Hey, we still have a job to do. Let's go.
Go? Oh, you can't mean.
Chris, I have to find you.
Well, thank you guys for watching my whole video. I really do appreciate it. So if you guys did enjoy it, please drop a like and subscribe. Anyways, in the future I'll be doing more DMC videos and also a little bit more Resident Evil and some other classic horror games. So if you guys want to check that out in the future, that'll be great. Anyways, thank you again, and I hope you guys have a great day.